Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
And I will be splitting my time with the member from LaSalle, Aymar Verdun. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to rise today to speak to the motion in support of the government's ratification of the Paris Agreement. This agreement, Mr. Speaker, represents the cumulative efforts of 190 countries, civil society partners, private sector companies, and Indigenous peoples. Collectively, we came together in common cause with the purpose of protecting our planet, and that is what we are here to discuss today. Mr. Speaker, the critical need to address this issue of climate change is actually a very big part of the reason I got into politics in the first place. I did this to work to ensure that we have a healthy and prosperous future for my teenage children and for future generations of Canadian children, and to ensure that our country pursues a path that will enable us to take advantage of the enormous economic opportunity that climate change represents and thereby ensure the future prosperity of this country. For 10 years, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives sometimes talked about climate change but failed to act. Last October, Canadians spoke and voted for real change, real action on the climate issue. The vote in this House this week represents a significant step in Canada's active international and domestic engagement regarding this critical issue. At its core, the Paris Agreement is an important tool for enabling the world to effectively address climate change. Article 6 of the agreement will be particularly important in paving the way for future cooperation amongst countries on the issue of carbon pricing, and I am proud that Canada played a key role in negotiating this part of the agreement. Global cooperation on carbon pricing will help to lower the overall costs of reducing greenhouse gases and thus has the potential to encourage countries to increase the level of ambition of their nationally determined greenhouse gas reduction targets over time. In our domestic context, First Ministers agreed in March to pursue the development of a pan-Canadian plan for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and furthering clean growth. Carbon pricing is one element of such a plan. Carbon pricing is an essential tool for reducing greenhouse gas emissions at the lowest possible cost and for stimulating investment in green infrastructure and low-carbon technology. Carbon pricing uses the market to drive clean investment decisions, encourage innovation, and reduce emissions. Carbon pricing can do all of this for a number of reasons. First, it provides flexibility. Instead of government making the decisions on what actions must be taken, carbon pricing allows businesses and consumers to take advantage of their own least-cost options for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and it provides a clear financial incentive for them to continue to reduce their emissions as long as it is cost-effective to do so. Second, carbon pricing will help Canada transition to a low-carbon economy. When manufacturers pay a price on carbon, this encourages consumers to shift their purchases towards less carbon-intensive goods, and for industry to respond to the growing demand for low-carbon products. Excuse me. Third, carbon pricing will help position Canada to compete in a future low-carbon economy. Carbon pricing provides businesses with an ongoing incentive to innovate, especially if they expect the carbon price to gradually increase over time. Business leaders recognize that low-carbon technologies and processes are often more efficient and that reducing greenhouse gas emissions increasingly makes good business sense. This is important for the ongoing competitiveness of all business. It also, however, acts as a critical catalyst for the development and deployment of Canadian-made clean technologies. Mr. Speaker, I spent the past 20 years of my life working as a senior executive in the entire environmental technology field. I personally witnessed the implementation of Canada's first carbon pricing mechanism in British Columbia by Premier Gordon Campbell in 2008 and experienced firsthand the positive impact that such mechanisms can have in spurring the development of a robust clean tech industry. There are clearly reasons as to why Vancouver boasts the largest clean tech business cluster in Canada. One of these is the fact that a price on carbon exists. In our government's discussions with Canadian industry and finance leaders over the past few months, a common theme emerged. Carbon pricing is one of the most efficient ways to reduce emissions, to stimulate the market, to make investments in innovation, and to deploy low-carbon technology. Indeed, in anticipation of an increasingly carbon-constrained marketplace, many leading corporations, including Suncor, Canadian Tire, and General Electric, consider an internal price on carbon in all of their investment decisions. In addition, we have received numerous submissions from business in support of carbon pricing through our Let's Talk Climate Action portal. In July, Minister McKenna met with 23 Canadian industry and business leaders about the path towards significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. Following that meeting, this group issued a joint statement with the Government of Canada in support of carbon pricing. Furthermore, all of these business leaders joined the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition. This World Bank-led initiative is an international voluntary partnership under which 74 countries and over 1,000 companies have expressed their support for carbon pricing. We also have strong evidence here in Canada that carbon pricing and the pricing of carbon pollution can reduce emissions while maintaining economic growth. Research has shown that British Columbia's carbon tax has led to a notable reduction in fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions at the same time as BC enjoyed Canada's strongest economic growth. In addition to the experience in British Columbia, there is growing momentum for carbon pricing in Canada. As of January 2017, Canada's 4 largest provinces, representing more than 80% of Canada's population, will have broad-based carbon pricing. British Columbia's carbon tax covers all fuels combusted in the province, and revenue from the carbon tax is used to reduce taxes. Alberta has had a carbon price applied to large industrial emitters since 2007, and Alberta's government is getting ready to put in place an economy-wide carbon levy starting in January of next year. Quebec has had an economy-wide cap-and-trade system since 2013. Quebec linked its cap-and-trade program with California's program in 2014, and the Quebec-California linkage is widely cited as a pioneering example of international cooperation on carbon pricing. Ontario's cap-and-trade program will start in January of next year, and Ontario plans to join the Quebec-California cap-and-trade program. Mexico has also announced its intention to join the Quebec-California program. The government has been working with provinces and territories to build on carbon pricing systems that are already in place and to put a price on carbon across Canada. Last March, in the Vancouver Declaration, First Ministers agreed that transitioning to a sustainable, low-carbon economy is necessary for our collective prosperity, our competitiveness, our health and security, and that taking smart and effective action today on climate change is essential for future generations. Mr. Speaker, First Ministers will meet this fall to develop Canada's pan-Canadian framework on clean growth and climate change. The framework will include a national approach to carbon pricing in which the pricing of carbon pollution plays a central role in reducing emissions and driving innovation over time. Carbon pricing is a central tool, but it is just one of a suite of tools required in a shift towards sustainable economic growth. In addition to carbon pricing, our government will also be considering a number of regulatory approaches to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to complement a national approach on carbon pricing. In addition, we have committed to making significant new investments in green infrastructure and in clean technologies. These investments and the clear, focused strategy the government has been developing with respect to clean tech and innovation will be critical not only as part of a comprehensive plan to address Canada's greenhouse gas emissions, but also as a critical enabler for putting the Canadian economy firmly on a successful transition path towards a low-carbon future. Mr. Speaker, over the past several months, I have been actively engaged with various federal departments and with companies across the country in discussing and developing frameworks and potential measures that will ensure that Canada will be well positioned to capitalize on the opportunities that a low-carbon future will provide. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to putting Canada firmly on a path to achieving its greenhouse gas reduction targets and to enabling Canada's transition to a low-carbon economy. With the ratification of the Paris Agreement, we will take a very important step, one that will signal to the world our commitment to this global effort. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to support this motion. I urge all of my colleagues in this House to support this government in taking action to secure the future of Canadian families and, in particular, the future of Canadian children.